Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. This is everything you need to know about Borderlands 4, from the new story that they're going with, to the different Vault Hunters available, the quality of life improvements you can expect in this game, and it should generally give you an idea of some of the cool new stuff in the game that might make you want to buy it. Before we get started here, I want to give a massive thank you to the Borderlands 4 team for sponsoring this video, and without further ado, let's get into the massive info dump of all things Borderlands 4. Okay, let's start with story. In Borderlands 4, the general storytelling philosophy is supposedly going to have a much more serious tone, and be less about making a joke every single minute, and instead, humor is used more as a coping mechanism used by the characters, rather than just making a gag for the sake of making a gag. We're also making a big change to the story here by leaving Pandora and arriving on a new planet in the series called Kairos. Now, the ancient Greek translation of Kairos is the right or critical moment, which basically means the proper time for action, but it seems like there's a lot of punitive action happening on Kairos. Sorry, was that a Borderlands 3 joke? Not sure. Because it's a prison planet that's been hidden for thousands of years by the Timekeeper, a dictator who thrives on order and control. And he's been keeping control of the population of Kairos with a faction of synthetic soldiers known as the Order, and he forces everyone to get a cybernetic implant called a bolt as well. Bolts are kind of in the base of a person's neck and can be removed for a cost, but there's a chance that they lose their sanity or they straight up die in that process. Now, if you haven't had your bolt removed, the Timekeeper can see through your eyes and can use the bolt to shut you down completely as well. Now, you might be wondering how this all relates to Borderlands 3, and the idea is that Lilith broke the veil that kept Kairos hidden when she teleported the rogue moon Elpis away from Pandora, which crashed into the protective veil around Kairos. So it's not like this is a completely isolated story, it's definitely going to tie back to the past, and with that, we've got some OG characters returning as well. So Moxie obviously is back, Zane is back, Claptrap's back, and speaking of Claptrap as well, they've actually got a Claptrap volume slider in the game this year, which I think is pretty funny. Now, this is also the first Borderlands that's non-linear, but first, I feel like, seeing as we've been talking about characters, we should start talking about Vault Hunters. So to give you a kind of top-line idea of how these Vault Hunters are going to play, there's Vex the Siren, and if you like companion classes, or if you like to rack up kills with elemental damage, Vex is going to be a really good choice. You've then got Rafa the Exo Soldier, and this is kind of an FPS player's class, if you will. Rafa's going to use his exosuit to wield all sorts of different types of weaponry, can get like shoulder-mounted rockets, can also use twin arc knives. There's like lots of different options there for the kind of FPS people that are jumping in thinking like, where do I start? You've then got Amon the Forge Knight, who's a highly customizable tank and uses his weaponized drones to adapt to different situations, and also has cool modifications to the way his skill tree works, which we'll talk about later in the video. And then we've got Harlow the Graviton, who specializes in crowd control and uses science to do it, not magic. So if you're more into the magic side of things, go with Vex. If you're more into the science side of things, maybe go with Harlow. Now, that's all well and good, but like none of this matters if the world is boring. So I want to talk about that in a sec here, but I'm going to quickly run through some sort of general info now as well, just so that you guys are up to date on that stuff, because there's some really cool changes in this game. So some miscellaneous tidbits. The game's release date's September 12th for Xbox Series X and S, PS5 and PC, but it's not on last gen. It's coming to Switch 2 on October 3rd. It's got full crossplay support at launch, and the base version of the game is $70. And then based on a bunch of recent statements from Randy Pitchford, he says the campaign length is very, very healthy. Like, it's not going to be a short campaign by any means. Some of the side quests will be instantaneous, fun little side things, or there'll be whole adventures outside the main story. And a big change on quests is that you no longer have to return to a quest giver to complete a quest. They're just going to auto-complete when you finish, which is so nice. The game is 2-player co-op split screen if you want, or 4-player co-op, or you can just play solo, obviously. Loot is also instanced for each player, so you have your own loot drops and you don't have to share drops with your friends. On cutscenes, those are rendered in real time, so your character and all equipped cosmetics will be visible. And Gearbox has added full missions and boss replays to the game if you want to replay the story or grind bosses. So you don't any longer have to save and load to rerun a boss. Instead, you can just return to the area and use Moxie's big encore machine to immediately start another boss run, which is huge. Like, they know people want to farm, they're making it work in the game. Like, there's some ludonarrative harmony there, which is really awesome. So that's my miscellaneous section out of the way. Let's move on to the world. There's 4 distinct locations: Fade Fields, Carcadia Burn, Terminus Range, and Dominion. And to give you a quick little description of each, Fade Fields is full of lovely beaches and hills and forests, which sounds wonderful on the surface, but underneath all that, you've got Idolator Sol, who rules the Fade Fields and controls food and supplies in the area to appease the Timekeeper. So it's not all hunky-dory in the Fade Fields by any means. You've then got Carcadia Burn, and this was pretty cool because you've got the sort of sandscapes and the canyons and stuff like that, but they've been fractured and torn apart by a celestial cataclysm. And in the area, you've got the Rippers, who are trying to fulfill the vision of their queen and fighting against the Order. The Order being what the Timekeeper controls. So there's some warring factions in Carcadia Burn. Next, we've got Terminus Range. Again, very different to those previous 2. You're going to have a lot of windswept mountains here, lots of snowstorms, things like that. And you'll also find the Augurs there as well, who are mining Ordinite, or usually mining Ordinite, under the terrifying gaze of Vile Lictor. And then 4th is Dominion. And this kind of reminds me of, I don't know, something like Los Angeles, right? Where you've got like lots of opulence and riches and power and a clear showing of control, but it's right up against loads of people that are really poor in the sort of ramshackle little huts that they've got, and they're having a terrible time. And meanwhile, the Timekeeper's like, hell yeah, go me. Like, that is what Dominion City is sort of built for. It's to show the Timekeeper's control, and that is the 4th location. Now, across all of these locations, they're also going to have a dynamic weather system, which will do things like change up the way that your visibility might work, because you'll have sort of dusty wind and rain and snow and all sorts of different stuff, depending on what region you're in and what the weather system is doing at that time. And as you move through those, you'll also come across random world events as well, and they'll have various different rewards to try and keep the gameplay more dynamic. Like, they're really trying to make this game expand on the old Borderlands kind of flow that you might have had in a previous game. Like, previously, you might have basically just bounced mission to mission and that would have been that. Whereas in this, because it's open world, they're trying their best to give you stuff to do in that space. They've also said that this game has more side quests than any previous Borderlands game by a significant margin. So they're really trying to populate that world as much as they can. Now, as you move through, you'll find that you've got a new companion called Echo 4, who will scan environments, hack into the Order's tech, and will give you a guided path to objectives when prompted, so you're not going to get lost all the time, which is nice. There's also points of interest called silos scattered across those 4 regions, and Echo 4 can hack into those too, and they can give kind of approximate locations of vault key fragments, and if you collect enough of those, you unlock hidden vaults, which are sort of dungeons, and you can unlock things like fast travel points and open new points you can rappel to and glide off of to easily traverse faster across the environment. Like, kind of a fast travel point, but in a Borderlands-y way. Echo 4 also lets you upgrade your ammo carrying capacity, change your cosmetics, and all those sorts of things, and you can do that wherever you are as well, because Echo 4 will be with you the whole time. Now, if you're wondering about the catch a rat locations, they are no longer how you are required to summon vehicles. Instead, you can just whip them out wherever you are in the world. It's almost going to work like a Destiny Sparrow. The vehicles are called Digi-Runners, and they can jet boost, shoot enemies with a kind of turret on the front, and can be customized with unlockables called hover drives to change components and handling. And a really nice feature here is you can fast travel directly to your co-op friends, no matter where they are as well. So that should save you some awkward running around. There's also new movement tech just generally around the world of Kairos, so you've got gliding in the game now, which is going to use stamina, and it seems to me that the player doesn't take full damage, but I don't know, I'd still be careful about running out of stamina while flying. Looks pretty cool though. And you've also got grapple hooks, double jumps, dashing, and climbing as well. Now, something they've also tried to do is make sure that some areas are more difficult than others, and so as you explore the world, you're going to come across some enemies that just have higher levels because they're in a certain location than the others that you might have experienced thus far. And that's the point, right? You're not going to be able to just walk through and bazooka everything straight away, you're going to be required to make some progress. But if you're in a low level region, the enemies will scale up towards your level but won't exceed it. So it's not going to feel like you go somewhere and it's just like, Jesus Christ, these enemies are so annoying because they die instantaneously all the time. And this is doubly good because it will mean that those enemies that scale up will drop loot equivalent to your level. So you won't feel like they're a complete waste of time, like they will still have a purpose. Also, each player can customize the difficulty of the game to their liking without changing how the game plays for any other players in the group. So it's really just going to come down to how you want to play. So let's go back to Vault Hunters and talk about their skills, their gear, and the looting in the game as well, because that's obviously very important. So loot's getting an overhaul, just straight up off the bat. Lower rarity weapons are going to be a bit more exciting now, while legendaries are meant to be extremely unique and have a substantially lower drop rate than Borderlands 3. And this is going to mean that there's a little bit more excitement to getting a really cool, unique legendary. Now, of all the weapons, there are 8 weapons manufacturers coming to the game. 5 are returning from previous games. So let's start with the new ones real quick. We've got the Order, which are new, and they load extra ammo into high-powered bursts. We've got Ripper. Those are new, and they need a moment to spin up until they blast at full auto until you let go of the trigger. Daedalus is new. These are easy to use, reliable, quick to reload. They feel like just sort of like all-rounders almost. We've got Tedior, and with these, when you empty a mag, you throw the gun like a grenade and then get back to firing with a replica that digistructs into your hands. That'll sound pretty familiar to those of you that have played some of the previous Borderlands games. And then we've also got Malawan, Jacobs, Vladov, and Torg all coming back as well. Now, another thing that makes weapons more unique than previously is the licensed parts system. So this makes it so that guns can have multiple abilities from multiple manufacturers at the same time. So you can have a magazine from Torg that shoots explosives, but then a Tedior part that lets you then throw it as well. And the amount of licensed parts on a weapon increases based on its rarity, with epics having the most kind of combined behaviors and legendaries having one less, but still having like a +1 unique legendary part or behavior. Like they're still going to have that sort of flair to them. And it's also worth being aware that you can't craft or modify guns. Each gun is acquired from loot in the world with its licensed parts, and if you don't get the one you want, you've got to keep farming. So they're really trying to make the looter part of this looter shooter feel like it's got some cool stuff at the end of it, but it is going to take some work to get there. They're also replacing the grenade slot with a new one called Ordnance, which is actually more than just grenades now. So you've got heavy weapons ordnance, so that's guns and ordnance items, and they'll deal both ordnance damage and weapon damage. And then you've got some items which are just ordnance, so that'll be things like grenades, throwing knives, stuff like that, and they'll only deal ordnance damage. Now, the way this works is you no longer rely on ammo for those grenades or for those ordnance weapons, and instead it's going to operate on a cooldown system, with each ordnance item having its own set number of uses. And so you're probably wondering how that works with weapons, and basically the cooldown timer is determined by how much ammo is left when cancelling the ability. So if you only use half of your rockets, your cooldown will be 50% shorter than it would have been if you used them all. There's also new loot called rep kits. These are a cooldown consumable that grant bonuses for use. For example, it can restore health instantly, it can give you temporary increased movement speed and stuff like that. And some Vault Hunters have skills in their trees that give bonuses like extra fire rate and stuff like that when using rep kits as well. Artifacts from Borderlands 3 are also returning, but under a different name. They're called enhancements now. And these give you the ability to build for a specific manufacturer. So if you want the ricochet behavior from a Jacobs on a Torg gun, you can use a Jacobs enhancement on the gun if it has a Jacobs license part, and in that case it will result in a gun that ricochets sticky projectiles between targets. Enhancements also come with stat bonuses that boost the targeted manufacturer as well. On top of all that stuff, there's new gear set type bonuses called firmware on enhancements. So if you have 3 matching firmware on your enhancements, you get a big bonus. And on top of all of that stuff, you've also got action skills. So each Vault Hunter has 3 action skills, and they give you unique abilities and have their own sort of beefy skill trees as well. And those skill trees have a variety of bonuses that are going to complement the action skill, and they include augments and capstones. So augments give you secondary bonuses to action skills, and in most cases, only one augment is equipable at a time. So for example, if you have an action skill equipped that summons minions, the augment you choose, called Ghast Blaster, might allow those minions to deal gun damage to nearby enemies after they spawn, like something like that. And then you've got capstones, and those are powerful augments, basically, that actually modify how an action skill functions. And they're going to be towards the end of a skill tree. So an example here would be building on the minion thing I said before. The capstone might allow you to equip an additional augment, heal your active minions to full, increase the move speed and attack speed of your minions, and all sorts of stuff like that. So while we're on the topic of action skills, let's quickly run through some of those. I'm going to give you one example from each Vault Hunter, just so you can kind of get a bit of flavor, but I'll put the others on screen as well. So we'll start with Vex the Siren. One of her action skills is Phase Familiar. Vex is joined by her minion Trouble. When killed, Trouble will respawn after a cooldown. You press the action skill to teleport Trouble, dealing damage in an area, and Trouble then transforms into a badass, fully restoring health and gaining increased damage for a duration, and then activating Phase Familiar will respawn Trouble if he's currently dead. Next, one of Rafa's action skills is Peacebreaker Cannons. For this, Rafa equips shoulder-mounted Peacebreaker Cannons, which fire at enemies in front of him for a duration, dealing kinetic gun damage, and Rafa can end Peacebreaker Cannons early, partially refunding action skill cooldowns. Then for Amon, this is a little unique because Amon gains a Forge skill depending on the equipped action skill. So if you have the action skill Onslaughter, where Amon overloads his Forge Fist and gains constant shield regen, gains increased incendiary damage, increased movement speed, and you can then Rocket Punch, dashing to an enemy and dealing more incendiary melee damage as well. That action skill has the Forge skill called Molten Slam, where you press and hold your action skill to slam a molten forge hammer into the ground, dealing even more damage. So it's kind of like an additional kind of mechanic to that core action skill. And then we've got Harlow, who can do things like use the 0 point action skill, which uses telekinesis to lift enemies off the ground. Now, Harlow, we actually know the least about so far, but there'll be a ton of details to come soon, and I'd recommend you check out my next video in this series, diving into detail about all the Vault Hunters, and that will be linked on the screen right now. So that should be everything you need to know to get started with Borderlands 4. So go ahead and click through to that next video, and I'll see you there.